I did forget my phone where I have a Slido app. So if anyone from the staff could bring it to me, I would be very, very pleased, because there is this, thank you so much, there is this opportunity to ask questions on Slido as well as live, should there be any. Alina, where is she? Will you join us too?
No, please join us.
I'm here. I have a question for you immediately, so you can use that microphone, because we want us to expand on some of the possibilities. These will be simple questions, but if you could bring the chair, yes, that would be the most useful. Actually, I think. Do not be shy. I think we're all a happy family of people who have a lot of money.
And we are gender equal now.
Yeah, we are gender equal, actually, yes, and this maybe happened for the first time on this stage today, but I'm not sure. But as far as I remember, some of the panels were really bad gender-wise, gender balance-wise. EIT Food Latvia, Horizon, these are the programs that you have mentioned. Would you maybe elaborate on the possibilities of funding, to acquire funding in Latvia? Are there maybe national funding opportunities, or these are the only ones that are sort of international?
Yeah, I believe I would not be able to elaborate on all the funding opportunities in Latvia for agri-food. So I mostly, as representative of the EAT Food, I encourage to participate in the EAT Food programs and use the support instruments.
What are your advice to those who are applying to these funds? We have talked about that today. In the very beginning, in the opening session, there was a phrase that sometimes startups come up with ideas that do not last, and so on and so forth. What is your specific advice? And that will be the question that I will raise to everybody. What are the most common mistakes that startups make when asking for funding? And also, what is the advice?
So as we mostly in Rikatak University are supporting deep technology startups and scientific teams, we see two types of challenges. One is motivating the scientists to participate in the programs. And it's very interesting, but usually it seems like all scientists are dreaming to become entrepreneurs and just to use the opportunities. But we see that the reality is not like that. And they need more role models, they need individual approach, they need motivation and incentives to proceed with this entrepreneurial journey and technology transfer through startups. So this is a big part, and I believe we still need to do quite a lot in this area. And we really hope in the Baltics and also in Latvia that it will improve with the first role model or this inspirational startup, unicorn in the agri-food sector that it will set an example, and we will see more scientists wanting to apply, wanting to participate and proceed with entrepreneurial journey. And from the other part, the second big challenge, I believe, is helping those deep tech startups to get fast track to the market. And we are talking a lot about those different support opportunities, and there are a lot in fostering research, but I believe still not enough in fostering commercialization part of it, and having easier way, faster way to get them to the market and collaborate and validate the solutions with the industry. So we are really hoping to use our big network to support in such a way, and also that more scientists, so needed deep tech technology, will apply and proceed the entrepreneurial journey.
Thank you. Orsalia, what would you say? Would you share advice for startups or SMEs actually, what they could do to grant themselves more money, more funding opportunities.
So my message here is that just before this panel discussion, we heard a lot of information about many different funding opportunities. Some of them are really bigger amounts for bigger ideas and even to go to Africa or to stay at home and develop something. But it's not only about big innovation steps, but SUAVE, like the project that I was talking about, offers a smaller step funding for smaller steps, for networking, for hiring a consultant to develop a business document or ask for some mentoring. So, but these are smaller amounts. So the message, to wrap up, the message here is that SMEs, startups must keep their eyes on different information channel about funding possibilities, because there are one day, today or a little bit later, or tomorrow or a little bit later, they will be able to find some funding possibilities for their size, for their needs, for the actual activity need, for the situation that they are in. So that's.
But where would you advise to start to do research? If, let's say, I have an idea, whether it's related to agri-food or not, whether it's related to food or not, and there are these different funding opportunities that all of you presented, but we don't really necessarily know where to find all of them or where to begin to look for them. What would your advice be?
My advice would be here is to continue to keep eye on actors like you can see here around the table or around the microphones, because the people who you here or online are able to listen to are close to are experienced partners in bringing this kind of information to this kind of ecosystem. So I know that this information ecosystem of information can be maybe a labyrinth for some, but contact your national info points or clusters, agro-food clusters, or those who are here today for more information.
Daniel, what would you say? What would your advice be for startups who want more funding opportunities?
Well, thanks for inviting me. First of all, maybe I would like to share where I come from. So I come from a rural region. We are something like 120,000 people in the region, with the biggest city of 18,000.
Which country is that? And
Slovenia.
Slovenia.
And our region is considered least developed by all the statistical, data. And I was listening to rural development for the whole day. So I would just say that we need to be very careful when addressing the rural development, because we need to ask people from rural regions on what they really want. So I think that building a Burj Khalifa in Pomorje region will not really do, people will not like it. If I may be a little bit more, provocative. So I myself I'm an entrepreneur. So I started 5 companies in the past. 2 of those failed completely. So we were listening about failing as well. 3 of those are still living. What I would like to share is that, once you start being as a startup, you have a couple of people who need to know everything. I mean, you are a kind of a Superman in this space. So how do you really solve by not going into the direction which Augustus hates, not just running around co-financing or finding money, but still doing your what you do best, so innovate and developing your businesses or your products, the best way would be to collaborate with those organizations that can help you. I mean, at the time when I was building startups, there was no such support maybe so widely available. I'm really happy that finally or recently European Union or European Commission has gone in the direction of supporting European digital innovation hubs and finding I would say even a perfect solution to the problem where you are creating one-stop shops for startups and SMEs and other target groups to be able to get a support, the complete support, systemic support for all your, I would say, challenges. And those challenges are not only co-financing or finding finances, but also, knowledge. You need to get knowledge, you need to get networks, you need to get access to the market. So we are building kind of, test before investing environment or ecosystem and so on. So all these things are somehow important for the success for startups. And where do you get it? So the European digital innovation hubs that are basically even connected between themselves are perfect places to get this kind of support. And of course, clusters are doing the same or similar things. We know EAN is a little bit, is also providing some of the services. So this is the way how probably startups are should be facing it. Yeah.
But when you say that we should be careful when talking about rural development, because we have to ask the people who are actually from rural areas. We have, however, expressed that most of us are essentially from rural areas. But does that also mean that you share the idea that startup inventors and companies who want to create startups, they should, for example, if they want to do something for agriculture, they should first go to a village and essentially find out what people need there. What are the actual needs of farming, for example?
Well, not exactly. I was referring to the fact that we need to go out of the needs. Need assessment is very important once building that. Yeah. It is essential that we develop some kind of a knowledge around certain communities, rural communities that are specific. We need to build on, or differentiate what or specialize communities. For instance, in Slovenia, that is a very hot debate on how you specialize certain rural regions in order to develop something that they are best at. For instance, our region is predominantly agricultural, and this is what we are doing. Basically, we are even stepping out of the national environment, building the digital innovation hubs, being a European digital innovation hub, and that is from the smallest region and the most least developed region. So the point is that we need to go to the rural areas and of course find out what works for them.
Thank you so much. Mr. Radicic, from your perspective, what are the most common mistakes that startups make when applying for funds?
Well, I will not maybe refer to Burj Khalifa example. I will not go that high. Maybe I'll stay on ground, and maybe I can give a dancing example. So as the old saying says, it takes two for tango. In this particular case, it takes three for tango. So the one types of actors are SMEs and startups. The others are rural areas, I would say, participants. And the thirds, we have heard from Alina already, are scientists. So the mistakes are happening on all three sides when we talk about it. And actually, with all these funding opportunities and with all these innovation collaboration potentials, what we are actually trying to do is to really put in place so-called multi-actor approach that is very interesting approach that many of us in Europe use. So let's start with startups and SMEs. Of course, some of them are, I would say, having a real close collaboration with their end users, but others are just, especially in the digital technologies, developing for the sake of development. And also developing because I would say they see some things as very important for themselves, not particularly for the end users. So that's a problem number one. Now we jump to scientists. Well, yeah, scientists, as we said, it is very important that we motivate them. But in order to motivate them, I have been around university for 20 plus years. In order to motivate them, it takes some time, it takes some efforts. Luckily, with all these opportunities, they are now starting to go out and seek and ask what's going around, because for the first time they can see, okay, this particular thing that I'm doing, for example, in food technology could be applied, or let's see how consumer is reacting on that, and let's see with the farmer guy how he can, or a lady, how they can actually produce it, etc., etc. Previously they were just back in their laboratories in most of the times, not with that real live connections, especially as Daniel mentioned with rural participants. And then we come to rural participants. Yeah, it's always challenging to motivate them to actually learn about new things, new technologies, new ways of applications, new opportunities. But recently, especially over the last several years, at least in our case, we have experienced that they are very much willing to. I remember a decade ago, we were facilitating a brokerage event, a speed dating between tech guys and farmers. Oh my God. They spoke the same language, but they did not speak the same language. I was walking around, orbiting around several tables, and I'd say it was like a monologues. Two monologues, two one-way streets, and not the dialogues. Nowadays, I see more dialogues happening, especially with acceptance of technology by, I would say, farmers from all ages. So this is something that is very important. So that's why, especially these opportunities that we were presenting previously are actually helping in bringing them together. The scientist group, also SMEs and startups, and last but not the least, definitely is rural. So let's hope that mistakes will be less and less in months and years to come. Of course, they will be happening, and what we experience, I suppose, in our funding opportunities is that many questions are coming, many doubts have to be solved, but I think we are heading in a much better direction.
Just a little tiny detail, developing something that is important to everybody, not just to you, you said. Isn't that how best innovations are born, though? You start with what is important to you, you believe in it, and then, this becomes global.
Again, it's a single dancer in my tango. It needs the second one, which is actually someone who will be challenging that, someone who will be asking whether this particular thing could be applied in my particular use case or scenario, etc. Of course, it's always good that in my garage shop I do something, but it's much better if somebody is observing me, helping me, and telling me maybe this part can go in another direction. So yes, I would say yes, both yes and no.
Thank you for putting it so simply and so down to earth. I think everybody can relate to that. Developing for the sake of development, that was the phrase that was used. Kasperi, would you agree that this is sometimes the case, and what are other mistakes that startups make?
Yeah, so hi, my name is Kasparas. I run a pan-Baltic venture capital firm that we invest in, amongst other things, also in agri-tech technologies. So for me, while listening to my colleagues, I was trying to answer the question, where is the end of research within the university, and where we can start calling the project a startup. I think that's a very important definition, because for research you can, and I think very bright minds do engage for the sake of the personal academic interest to answer certain questions. Once you have a startup, it's more, the focus is more, again, I will maybe rephrase what the colleague said, but is about building the ecosystem of stakeholders around the idea. And in fact, some years ago, I've heard a rule in Germany. People are saying that if you don't find co-founders and stakeholders for your idea, within the 3 months you should drop it and start doing something else.
Is it true, do you think?
We are focusing on deep tech, so I think deep tech is a longer term game, but the general idea is that if you do not, if you're not able to engage people, bring on the people with your idea from different parts of life, whether it's your customer, whether it's your investor, whether it's a research grant and the committee for the research grant, you have to be able to communicate and make people love what you do and join kind of the journey. For that, again, coming back to the difference between research work and the startup, to engage people, you need to have many more answers answered by that time. So a fundamental research on, let's say, photonics can be a research project, but once, for example, there's a Latvian startup that uses lasers to weed the carrots, that's already a startup, that's already a project where you use some kind of fundamental advancement in photonics or in lasers to try and find the applications for it and then make a business out of it.
So just to clarify, why is that borderline so important between science and a startup?
Because the scientific question requires a lot less answers. It's much more narrow than the business development plethora of questions.
Do you believe that Lithuania, rural regions of Lithuania, have a lot of unlocked potential?
Another thing that maybe I will come to the answer to your question, but another thing that I wanted to mention, in our portfolio, out of, I think, 3 agri-tech related businesses, all come from the new generation of people within the families who have been running the business, be it agriculture or fertilizer industry and so on and so on. So I think fundamentally the new generation is looking for new ways to live and to engage in agriculture, and technology seems to be usually the answer that they are interested in.
There are hopefully some startups or potential innovators watching us now, maybe online, maybe here. If you were asked to give one line of advice to them, what would it be to get more funding?
I'll use another example from an Estonian startup called the Agronom. Robin is a 3rd generation farmer. And he told me the story when his grandfather used to tell him that every spring, when the snow melts, he would go to his fields, take his trousers down, sit on the ground, and if he can sit, then that's the time to start all the farming activities. And Robin didn't want to follow that tradition, so he started using sensors and all these kind of things. So my advice: don't sit on the ground with your trousers down and start looking at technology.
But is it true or is it not true that you have to start with solving your problem and then you will solve the world's problems?
I think the most interesting thing is to find the problem that you're deeply interested in, because it's not a 1-year journey. You commit to it for many years. Once you take the first outside capital, I think it's fair to assume that you take a lot of responsibility on it and you commit yourself and your team for it to deliver. So I think first and foremost, it has to be a very interesting topic or something that you feel passionate about yourself. And of course, secondly, as I said, you need to question the world, whether that is only interesting to you or whether you will find comrades who will go all the way with you together. And that is a very important, for me at least, I think it's a very good signal that you can build a startup that will be successful rather than just a business or a regional kind of solution or something like that.
I want to go back to that idea that was referred to as the one Augustas doesn't like, but the idea of going to different funding opportunities and just trying every opportunity there. We have said many times today that we should not be afraid of failure we should resume our wishes and we should try again and again. What is wrong about applying to every different possibility you find? I mean, what is so shameful and bad about it? Orsolia, what do you think?
I have seen several examples of this, of a good example for this and bad as well. What I saw with a good example was someone who is reusing the same idea, but for different purposes. So under one open call, they try to digitalize shoemaking, and the next day or next year, they try to digitalize whatever agriculture. So that it can be. At the beginning, we can say that, okay, from when we start, it's the same simple, not rocket science technology, but you get much further if you look at the funding possibilities as building bricks, and you start to build a high, I can't remember the name
Burj
now.
Khalifa?
Burj Khalifa. So, because finally you will have a nice high and iconic building, and when you have solution for everything, you have a solution for nothing. So you can get specialized in. So it's my advice is to use funding possibilities to become a specialist. What you would anyway do with a normal and a strategic business mindset if you only use your money, you stay targeted. Do the same with public European money.
Daniel?
Yeah, we decided to give Augustus 10 euros for every mentioning of Burj Khalifa. So I already have 20 euros on my account. You know, we had one debate on this particular topic of taking the funds, right? And it was in a big conference in Slovenia when some public organizations were kind of representatives were saying that, you know, for SMEs, this is something that will make them lazy and, you know, and I really disagreed. We were arguing openly. Because imagine that you are an SME and you need to compete, not only to innovate and to make research, you need to compete. And the pace of your development is also very important. It's a competitive factor. So imagine then you need to put all your money into that. I mean, your personal money, you're assigning the loans, you are giving your house as a mortgage and everything. Imagine that. How many of you are willing to do that? So with co-funding, you can develop faster, you get more people on board quicker. It's not only about funding, it's also about networking, it's also about support, knowledge support you need. It's not solely funding that comes into your hands. And that way, I mean, you, of course, disperse risks and you get all the additional knowledge. And maybe then you are able to succeed. And even in that path, you may change to adapt to certain conditions. So in a way, this funding is also to be considered as financing the people that are dealing with this money, not only, you know, what are we financing? Are we financing ideas or we finance the people? Like, you know, this never-ending discussion about European approach in funding and American approach in funding. So take all the money you can get as soon as possible and then go on. Of course, we have those situations like people running around and doing just this, but those are, in my opinion, those are still very, very few examples. And eventually they cease to exist or they do something else. So my message is clear.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yes, Alina?
If I might add to this challenge, I believe that it all comes down to lack of focus and lack of clear understanding of commercialization plan. And this is why it is happening, because they try to catch different opportunities, talking with a lot of mentors during the hackathons, incubation programs, acceleration programs, and each mentor is trying to direct them into different, trying and testing different hypotheses. And if you do not have this clear plan or understanding early what is your commercialization strategy, what is your focus, and what you want to achieve, then you're just you're lost in the all different support programs that are out there.
I understand that, but if you have a very, very clear and focused plan, while you are trying to, do something about it, the market may just change and the commercialization needs may change too. Or does that not happen that fast?
But also, I would like to add a few notes to what colleagues were saying, and I believe we do not talk much or emphasize the difference between technological business or technology startup and deep tech or science intensive startup. And these are different strategies, like in which, how do you approach the investors? How do you approach the development, and how you approach the funding? So I believe we should start and emphasize this much.
Kasparas or Mladen, would either of you have anything to add to the fact why it is so bad to go around and collect different funding opportunities? No?
Well, there is a trap for startups because maybe it's a brave thing to say, but public grants have a tendency to be, let's say, less commercially competitive in its approach, and I think there's nothing like fundamentally wrong with it, because it funds the very, very early or the riskiest part of the development of an idea. But in general, there are many teams who fall into trap of not going for competitive market rate financing, like venture capital funds, or before that, like angel investors who bring a lot of knowledge, but continue applying for public grants with different approaches, and that becomes a business model for the teams. So that is a dangerous trap, and even within our portfolio, we often challenge the teams whether they should, even in the later development of the companies, to challenge whether they really need public grants, who embed on it a lot of bureaucratic tasks, or let's say labor, and many other things. So if you can get competitive market rate investments, I think we usually suggest that they do that. So that's one thing. Having said that, again, at the very early stage, I don't think you have a very clear, none of the teams, unless they come from, they have done successfully 3 or 4 startups in exactly the same area, none of the teams have the full knowledge of how this business or technology should pan out. So the most important, again, maybe a little bit of a mantra, but the most important capability for the founders of successful startups, many people say, is actually the speed of learning. So on Monday they have certain assumptions, on Friday they drop 5 or 6 of them, stay with maybe 3 new ones, and that's how they keep the speed up. So so that's the point. That's one point. And again, maybe to add also a statistical answer, many people who will have at some point they will make a bet on something. For example, carbon markets in agriculture, voluntary carbon credit. Is that the future or not the future? If it is the future, do you need to have verified carbon models that grow slower, or can you just develop any kind of land model and then start selling to everyone and see what happens in 2 or 3 years? That's maybe a faster model, but at some point, you have to make a bet on what you believe in and what should the market look like in the future. 95% apparently fail. Well, not apparently, that's the statistics. So only 5% get it right. time and time again, and that's where we get the unicorns.
Would you remember, any of you actually, any examples of that 95%, for example, where you participated when someone applied for funds for their startups, and then you took up the application and you provided funding, and then next year you regretted so much that you couldn't sleep at nights, or maybe the other way around, you said no to a project and then someone else took it up and you were like, why didn't I say yes to this? I think it would be really interesting to the startups out there if they are watching us. I mean, if you would be willing to share, we would very much appreciate it. Anyone?
Nadan, I think you have examples.
I spoke too much, so.
I don't think so. I think
Are
what
you
you're
able
saying
to
is
sleep
really
at night?
interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have many examples.
I know you presented us with 5 different
Yeah,
opportunities. So
not only from the ongoing, but also from the past activities. Many of the startups back then, now well established and mature SMEs, are still very successful in their domains, and they operate not only on the European scale but also globally. So I have the privilege and honor to communicate frequently with CEOs and founders of several of those SMEs coming from many different European parts, from Central Europe, from Southeastern Europe, or elsewhere. So this is definitely happening. And what is very important, and if I may very briefly just reflect to
yes,
what we
please.
heard, is actually not to be disappointed. Okay, on our side, we must not be disappointed. And also, startups and SMEs applying for funding, they must not be disappointed. What I see as a common mistake is actually, oh, nobody granted my splendid and extraordinary project, and now I'm completely demolished and I will not do anything in my life. And no, it's not like that. I mean, there are more no's than yeses in your life.
Yeah.
So that's my main message. So startups and SMEs should be aware of that. And I agree with Kaspar said, I mean, and also Daniel mentioned that those startups and SMEs seeking for public funds will eventually vanish, right? And as much as we align approaches in actually assessing innovative ideas from private funding perspective and from public funding perspective, those scholarship seekers will simply vanish, and they have to put, if not the same, then almost the same efforts, stamina, and also excellence in their proposed ideas. So that's at least what we try to do, and to explain to them that we really want great ideas to happen and not just to disburse some public funding that exists somewhere. So that's important for SMEs to know.
Thank you. Anyone else? Daniel?
Well, I think everything was said, but we are always looking at those unicorns and those successful stories. There are so many stories that eventually became successful and became sustainable. So we need to take a look at the broader perspective, even when addressing public funding or private funding. I have been there personally. It's not that easy to get. Everybody wants to finance unicorns, right? But there are also other stories nobody's interested in, and they are as equally important because they bring value, maybe some other value, not only financial or something like that. So there is no one size fits all, and in every step, in every process, you need to search for different type of fundings. So as I would agree to that you need to change strategy even weekly or monthly, and be flexible. And this is a difference between successful startups or SMEs and those which are not successful. And there are many out there. So we don't want to focus only on the most successful ones. We need to take a broad picture of what's happening and how to provide support for them.
Thank you. Let's see if there is a question or a comment in the audience. Yes, please. Let's see if there is anyone else who hasn't asked a question yet, but then obviously we'll go back to you, and we're doing this now because we don't have any other questions. Microphone to Augustus, please. Thank you so much.
Collect money.
Revenge time on behalf of Hamilton family and myself, the Burj Khalifa. So today we spoke a lot about the failures from startups. So I would like to twist it like 880 degrees and to talk about your failures. And in my opinion, and there is a common understanding that in most of the cases, venture capital funds as well as the projects which are doing the cascade funding, they believe that their job is to evaluate, to due deal, and to finance the project, or the companies, or the startups, or the spin-offs, whatever. In my opinion, this is about 5% of the job what the organizations you represent supposed to do. So can you, in one sentence, each of you, tell what is actual your job and how you think when your job is achieved and what kind of goals you're having? Thank you.
Thank you. That will be very interesting if people are willing to add their contributions. I think you're... Yes, please, Mladen.
Well, thanks for the question, Augusto. I can give you one example. In one of the activities I have presented in slides, this one with Rising Stars. So we have actually not only technical, let's call it like that, process per se. So we know that we have to receive some applications, evaluate them, assess them, then actually do the technicalities around disbursing this funding. It is also important to couple it as much as possible with other values, as Daniel mentioned, especially with values around business support, especially with values around, I would say, constant monitoring of how they progress. So that's why, for example, in this particular case, we have developed a three-layer support mechanism that we called must do, should do, and could do levels in terms of business coaching, market feasibility, and many other activities. So I would say that our predominantly job is not only to do the practicalities and technicalities, but also to provide a real tangible value for them, maybe not in the same context and extent as, for example, commercial accelerators do so, or to some extent as venture capital funds, but to give as much as possible. So that's at least how we see it.
Anyone else would like to talk about their failures? Yeah, I think.
That's a very relevant question, I think, and with the partners that we are working on shaping a good framework of framework of how we give the money finally, how we support SMEs. I have a wish to build something, to shape it the way that we build all our earlier experience about failures in the actual new call systems, and to be vigilant, to be cautious upfront, to avoid on our side, on the money giving side, on the monitoring and controlling side, and to build the maximum cautiousness bricks in our systems, but to be able to secure European money, the public funds, and but give the land to the startups that you showed, so they not to be on their back all the time, but to build a system that is done the way they will not be able to make big mistakes, because we built the elements in it up front, and they will be able to focus on the innovation, on the funded activities, easy, in a relaxed way, and not to bother them too much with the administrative and monitoring stuff, or do it in a polite way in the background as gray eminence. So I think that this comes from a little bit from my experience, that it's better to nurture the companies and be like a parent, bring them up in a way that we give them an environment when they are safe, and we have already told them at the beginning, you can do this, you can do that, and they will be wise enough to follow.
Kasparas, you haven't spoken for some time.
Yeah. So maybe I'll answer from the other angle. Well, as a venture capital fund, I am the founder as well of that fund, and I think success or failure, if you look from my personal perspective, is whether my fund is growing, whether it's delivering to my customers, meaning my LPs or my investors, in other words, and whether I'm doing a good job. So at the moment, so far, for me, there is no clear definition of success or failure. The metrics and the results are showing very well. The team that we set up to deliver on the strategy that we still believe very deeply, and in fact, we are raising or starting to raise the second fund to double down on that strategy. In a brief, a strategy is that Baltics as a region have so many opportunities, but not enough quality fund managers who can take the startups from pre-seed, seed stage to Series A stage financing. Series A stage meaning a lot more international rounds. So at the moment, in terms of this metrics, we have 40% graduation from seed to Series A of our fund, which is almost twice higher than the European average, including the Western countries fund managers. So from that perspective, I think I wouldn't be ready to say that we're failing. I think we're doing very, very well. From another perspective, maybe small failures are if we are not learning. We are not perfect. So when we set up the journey 3 years ago, more than 3 years ago, we had certain package of knowledge and certain capabilities. Of course, you can always look back and say, look, in the last 4 years, you didn't learn enough. You failed to identify certain traits in founders that you shouldn't be investing. You didn't find the personal relationship with a certain founder that maybe you could have helped much more. These are failures that every job entails, and we certainly, me personally, I have that closet, but fundamentally as a fund manager that has promised to deliver to the investors on the strategy, I think we are right spot on, and we are on a very good path.
Daniel, any small or big failures that you would want to share?
We would need to organize another panel for my failures. So I failed too often, probably, but nevertheless, we learn from failures, right? What I would like to say regarding to the Cascade funding, this is a great opportunity because this is one of the rare funds that basically put the food where the money, where the mouth is. The amount of the European Commission funds available is enormous, and very few, the programs are really elaborated such that they reach the target groups like farmers or SME startups and so on. So I really like the approach of this Cascade funding because they are really going to the right people, to small organizations that are not able to build great consortium, write magnificent proposals, 60 pages and so on and so on. That's first thing. The second thing, and the answer to Augusta's question is that how we support startups and SMEs, also from our failures, is that we assess them individually. So we try to understand what they need, and then with the variety of programs around us that are where we are participating, not only Cascade funding opportunities, but also knowledge sharing, and especially through DIH and through EDIH, there are a huge amount of systemic approaches how to support them. Then we elaborate approach for particular startup SME. So this is the way probably that helps a lot, not only focusing on co-financing, right?
Thank you for this contribution, Elena.
Yeah, maybe I will just answer quickly and also suggest to do the same. Last November, we started annual tradition, let's say, analyzing this country innovation index, like being an innovation ecosystem players in Latvia. When the results were published, we were very concerned and actually started to dig in deeper and understand the aspects of it and trying to understand what we could do better in order to support the overall ecosystem of the country and then each particular aspect of it and setting for goals for ourselves. And I believe this activity was very helpful. Like it showed that it's great, like how many different projects we have. If it doesn't result back in Latvia being in this innovation ecosystem just a bit higher or reaching some more success, then something needs to be done more. This is one, and in particular, yeah, defining the particular aspects, and I like to follow the key performance indicators or follow the path of the startup or of the team and see if our target is to get deep tech commercialized or in the market or helping EU market. I really want to see it commercialized. And like basically acting like their best friend, the one who is leading them through the journey, suggesting, maybe fighting from time to time for them, giving them very concrete, specific feedback, what they can, like what is expected from them. But we want to see the real results, and I believe this is the most important.
Thank you, Alina. I think we have time just for one last question, which I saw the gentleman in row 2 was raising his hand. Would we please get the microphone for him? Thank you.
Yeah, I was listening to you, and no offense, just for discussion, right? It's you are using a lot of jargon, a jargon that, well, to my feeling, comes from the US. So it's about capital, it's about making money, it's about unicorns. But on the top of the screen is startup, that's okay. That's jargon that we use for startup, but there's also village. What is special about villages? If you look at the target group, so the startups, the guys and girls that are living in the villages, in the rural area, are they attracted by this jargon? If they are attracted to this jargon, they go to the city. They go for the big money. Augustus, you believe it or not, but there are, for people growing up in the boondocks, there are more values than making money. And there are people staying at the rural area because there are other values, their family, or they like to have a hobby in breeding sheep, or, you know, there are a lot of reasons to stay in the rural area. And are we targeting this group? There might be talented people there that understand the needs of the rural farming or food producing or what's needed in the rural. I'm afraid we're missing them, to be honest. And I think we should think about, is innovation in the rural area, is that the same paradigm that we are now talking about? Should there be a rural paradigm for innovation? It can be just very innovative if he's a smart guy, is taking a nice concept with drones from Greece, applying it to the 30, 40 farmers in his village and providing a service and makes decent living because he can take care of his sheep breeding activities and be part of the family and take care of his parents, these kind of things. So I think we should consider more about innovation and startups in the village jargon, I would say.
Thank you. These are some really interesting ideas and important comments. And I saw that Daniel was smiling, which makes me believe that you agree with the gentleman here. Would you maybe say a couple of words on should there be a rural paradigm for innovation?
Yeah, I totally agree. Probably we will have a discussion later on. And that's exactly true. I mean, that was my point by saying we shouldn't build Burj Khalifa in village.
Another 10 euros for Augustus.
Yes,
I hope
yes.
that he will
I win.
invest them
It's
well.
30 euros from me. And that's exactly the point. So who are we to speak on behalf of rural people or people living in rural areas to say to them how they should develop their innovations and how they should live, right? So we need to be careful. We need to stress the importance of need. What are their needs? And definitely, for instance, we have local butchers like third generation butchers who is suffering from public administration or tax administration or whatever. He doesn't, and he's very innovative with innovative food types and new food products and everything. He doesn't even consider to do something else than that. So how do you manage? How do you treat this guy? And I strongly agree to the point that we need to have a different jargon when approaching.
Kasparas, you wouldn't agree with that, would you? Do we really need a separate paradigm?
Let's define Oxford and Cambridge as a village, and then I agree. But I think what the gentleman was referring to is actually the adoption of innovation rather than the creation of innovation. So the question I would rephrase is, could you find early adopters in the villages, and whether we can engage with them to, to grow more early adopters of technology, people who would be testing the technologies that are not against their culture, against their way of life, but actually enhancing to them. So I think you'd still need centers of excellence to develop the innovation, but they can maybe find the new use cases if they engage more with those communities.
I think we will stop right here, and I will advise all of you to sit at the same table for dinner so you can continue, because the discussion is truly interesting. And I want to thank everybody now: Alina Dolmate, Daniel Kopot, Orsolya Shaponje. Do you want to say it so we all know how to pronounce it next time?
Saplonsai.
Saplonsai. Mladen Radicic and Kasparas Jurgelonis, thank you everybody so very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.